Welcome to week 2 of our series, Was This God's Idea? A series on the creation account of Genesis, points, counterpoints, and implications. The title of the material for this week is Education and Faith, Where Two Worlds Collide. I will say up front that I approach this study with an understanding that we are whole, integrated beings, meaning that we have various dimensions of being human that all come together all the time. So we are spiritual, physical, intellectual, emotional, and social. And you can use the SPIES acronym to remember that. So with that in mind, we often have to fight against this popular notion in our society that all of the parts of who we are can and should be compartmentalized. Where we live, it's easy for people to suggest that spiritual or religious activity should be isolated from all other aspects of life. In fact, the Christian church has largely supported and even promoted this myth by designating times and places for worship and prayer and sacred activity. So we consider everything that happens outside of those times and places to be quote unquote secular or ordinary life, the rest of our existence, where we work and learn and have fun. So I want to give a shout out to our educators, our teachers, both public and private, and our parents and guardians who teach children how to read. At the same time, I want to challenge this notion that spirituality or service and worship to God is somehow separate from this act of teaching and learning. At the end of the day, regardless of what else you think about how someone should approach the Bible, it is written text. It must be read or heard. It must be understood and processed. And none of that is possible without some knowledge of literary aspects. Elements like genre, context, metaphor, simile, imagery are all going to play into the discussion throughout the rest of this series. It is foundational to have this conversation now at the beginning of this series for this reason. Basically, every different position we hear, every stance within the Christian faith toward the meaning of something in the Bible, including Genesis, results from differences over this issue, the literary nature of Scripture. Whatever else we want to say about the Bible, we know that it must not only be read or heard, but also interpreted. And that means while we value the message itself, the interpreter, which is you and me, cannot be ignored. As we will see, people with different views of Genesis may share the same theology or belief in one God as creator of life, but vary wildly in their interpretation of the language used to tell us about that God. It is why we will literally, and I use that term with a smidgen of pun intended, will learn from authors and scholars who have such diverse perspectives that one sees a passage of Scripture as historical fact, while the other sees it as pure fiction. What we're going to have to decide in the end is what that means for us. But to do that with intellectual integrity, we need to hear the rationale used and see from different angles ourselves. Only then can we have a genuine dialogue and grow in our wisdom, both individually and collectively.